All right, so welcome everyone to this webinar. So here we have our guest speaker, Michael So, who will be talking to us about his experience working as a software engineer at Facebook, and then also his prior experience majoring in computer science at Harvard. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about KTBYTE first. So KTBYTE is a computer science academy. We teach students ages 8 to 18 computer science. And we specialize in students ages 8 to 18, so from elementary school all the way to high school. Our curriculum is progressive, so we start from beginner level computer science using Java blocks, which is something that our software engineers built as a tool for younger students to learn Java programming. And so we have within our coder classroom, our environment, an ability for students to drag and drop on these blocks to learn fundamentals of computer science. And then the students progress to higher level classes, which is the AI machine learning classes. We've been able to offer the college level of computer science to a lot of our younger students. So our classes range from these varying levels, and we also offer use of code classes, generative art classes, and design as well. So yeah, I'll have Michael introduce himself. Michael, can you talk a little bit about what your educational background is, a little bit about what you do now, and just a brief introduction?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I'm currently a software engineer at Facebook. I work on the PyTorch project, which is an open source library for machine learning and AI. I went to Harvard as an undergrad. I majored in computer science, and before that, I was in Lexington High School with
Oh, awesome!
with Ben. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of our students go to Lexington High School.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you get into computer science?
So, I think I had always been really interested in computers. As a kid, I played like a lot of video games, and I convinced my mom at one point to let me build a computer so that I could it would be like a faster computer to play games with. And so I learned a little bit about the hardware, the internals, that kind of thing, and I dug a little deeper. My first experience programming was actually in the Visual Basic for Applications environment that comes with Microsoft Word. So it's I was making little macros for Microsoft Word, and that was for my debate team. I wanted them to be more efficient at processing evidence and doing research. So I made little shortcuts that they could use, and that was actually a pretty good beginner environment, ironically, because you could kind of see the effect of everything you were doing, and I was working on something that was really helpful to me personally and my friends and my teammates, so it felt very impactful. And then when I got to Harvard, I actually started out concentrating in economics, which like a lot of people at Harvard do. It's kind of the default thing. But ever since the beginning, my freshman fall, I took CS50, which is our introduction to computer science course, and it's a very popular course. They do a lot of sort of promotion, and they get people really excited about computer science. They do a really good job of that. It's actually all available online now, so you can check that out.
Okay.
But the thing that really distinguished computer science from other courses for me was the CS50 team had built out a lot of tools, the thing that we all use to compare courses and figure out what courses we wanted to take was built by the CS50 team. And to me, it was really cool that you could build things that were really useful to people immediately. This is something I could use that I found really impactful for my daily life. And it was just made by people who took this course. So to me, that was what was the most attractive part about computer science, the idea that you as one person can really build something that can be really helpful to someone else, and they can just like use it and play with it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And is that something that is what makes you drawn to computer science now as well? The same thing of like being able to create useful, impactful things for others?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I think that a lot of other fields, it's harder to have such a direct impact on people. A lot of times you're working as like a small part of a larger initiative or organization and trying to build something. That's definitely true in computer science and software engineering as well. But I think the individual impact that one person can have is really large. You see a lot of these very widely used projects that are maintained essentially by one person or a small team of people, and you can do a lot and compete with all the biggest companies, and if you make the right decisions and do a good job with how you built it, you really can be very impactful, even just on your own or with a small group. And I
Right.
really like that.
Did
Yeah.
learning programming with Visual Basic when you were in high school, did that help you? Did that solidify your decision of majoring in computer science or not?
Uh, Yeah, not really. I mean, like I said, I started out in economics. There was like a moment I went back and forth. I was thinking, will I ever be as, I don't know, good as people who had been programming since they were babies or something?
Hmm.
And I thought about that for a long time, and I realized, you want to put yourself in challenging situations and try and do your best to learn. So I decided to switch to computer science, but um, it was really that Visual Basic like gave me I don't know, it was like a nice way to play around with stuff. I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I didn't know how to declare a variable in Visual Basic, which is, not actually like most other programming languages. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
but yeah, like, so I didn't actually know what I was doing. I was just kind of like making changes, and you could see how these changes affected things when I ran it. And I like that process, I guess, of
Right. Instant
um,
gratification of seeing something immediately.
yeah, you can build something, and also you can like play with something and see how the changes you made affect like the execution of the program, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's very
Right.
cool.
Right. And is when you were in high school, we had an audience request for you to tell a story about what made you interested, I guess, in programming in the first place, or building computers in the first place, and like the extent that you went to convince your parents to allow you to
No,
go
yeah.
down that path.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was really about like playing games. I really liked playing computer games as a kid, and because I'm now old, I guess it was games like StarCraft or Diablo. Like I don't know if anybody still plays those, but so I really liked playing games, and games come with like a specific culture around computing. And like building computers and like customizing your setup, and I was really interested in all of that. And like I said earlier, I like convinced my mom to let me build a computer. And similarly, I wanted to go to like BlizzCon, which is a gaming convention. And it's because like there was a sequel to a game that I really liked. So StarCraft 2 was like announced, and you could play it, and no one else could play it. You could only play it if you like went to this convention. So my
Oh,
parents made me put together like this PowerPoint and like a presentation, which is like, this is why I should be able to go. And I researched the business, like the business that was running this, and it's like, oh, this is their profits. This is a big industry. It's kind of interesting to learn about. I mean, it was all kind of silly. I think they just wanted me to like jump through some hoops before they would let me go on this trip. But
right.
it was really interesting, and I actually think that this is true across a wide um, like range of my like people I know who got into computer science. I talk to people who I work with at Facebook, who work at other companies around here, and I'd say like 60 to 70% of them, like the beginning of their interest in computer science was through like video games, computer games, and that kind of thing, because it's the thing that's most relatable, I think, to kids, because it's like fun to play, and then you realize that you can, make changes to it. You can like modify games, and a lot of people got into computer science that way. That's like what because you need a passion for it and you need a reason why you're building any of the things you're building. And if it's like to play a fun game with your friends, that's like for kids, that's a pretty good reason, that's like
Right.
an excellent reason to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think, from your experience, is there like a similarity between building games and playing games?
Um, It depends on the game. Like there are some. My thing is, I know a lot of parents are like worried that their kids are playing too many games. My mom was definitely worried that I was playing too many games for sure. But I think that it's about how you engage with the games and like the community around games. So there are people who, there are games where you're just like shooting stuff and you're not really. It's kind of very superficial, and you don't learn that much, and it doesn't really spark an interest in like anything to do with computer science. But then there are other games, I guess, like these, like Minecraft would be a good example. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know
You
again.
can, right.
But like there are like very big like communities around modding the games, going into the game files and changing things, adding new features, and you can share them with other people and compare and like mess around. And that sort of the games that emphasize those creative aspects, I think, are like really powerful tools to get people interested in computer science, because that is what computer science is, right? It's like it, you're creating a model of a system, any system. It could be a little model world like in Minecraft, but it could be, I don't know, like for me, it's the model of I don't know, like a deep learning network, neural network, right?
Hmm.
And you're just messing around with that model. You're like trying different things. You're building out little features or little extensions that help you do new things,
Hmm.
and it's all really the same. So I think that especially these games that emphasize exploration, creativity, are really important for getting people interested in this kind of stuff.
Right. I think a lot of parents would be quite happy to hear that the time that a lot of their kids spent on playing video games is
Yeah.
not a waste of time. It's actually encouraging
Well, it's
development of
like
a
kind of a
passion.
waste of time, but like kids can waste time too. It can't be work all the time. I don't know.
Right, right. No,
You got to
exactly.
make it fun.
Right, right. No, I think that's a solid argument for the benefits of playing games. And so, okay, moving on to the next question, it would be, how has your education benefited your careers? I
Yeah.
guess it could be high school education at LHS and also your college education.
So in high school, I actually didn't have any formal education in computer science. I never took like the CS class in high school. In general, I don't think like the American like primary schooling system has like a very good. Maybe things have changed a little since I graduated, but they don't have like a very good handle on how to teach computer science in a way that's like compelling to students.
Hmm.
Um, as for college, I think my education, there are like two ways in which your education can benefit your career. The one is, you just learn a lot of material. You learn more in college than you learn like anywhere else. For any period of time, they did a bunch of studies about people who learn computer science. Some people start when they're in their early teens and have been programming for many years when they enter college. And some people start, their first line of code is written in their introduction to CS class at their freshman year, right?
Hmm.
And they actually found out at the end of 4 years, everyone is the same.
Hmm.
And that's just because there's such a massive like density of learning that you can do in those 4 years, where you're like taking classes, you're doing projects, you're working with other people, that it kind of flattens out all the prior experience. So it's really about,
Hmm.
if you stick with it at the end of 4 years, you'll be as knowledgeable as basically anyone else at that
Right.
point in their lives, right? And so Harvard had really good computer science classes. I wouldn't say that they were like that much better than any other school. I think that if anything, I thought that the Harvard classes were they were a little abstract and like theoretical for what would be directly most useful for my career.
Hmm.
But it's good to build that sort of foundational knowledge. Um, yeah, I guess that's how I would put it. But like any sort of college education in computer science, I think is like fairly equivalent, and it does a lot to catch you up if you start late or anything like that.
Hmm. And how, where are you getting the idea, or like how are you informed about the fact that you don't feel like the Harvard CS classes are like not that they're not as good, but like that they're more abstract, I guess, than like, let's say, like
Oh,
Cornell's computer science.
I mean, part of it is like a specific Harvard D thing, which is Harvard has a tradition as a liberal arts college, and I think
Mhm.
skews towards like there are relatively few like software engineering-y classes, and there
Mm.
are relatively few classes where you write a lot of code. And for me, like if it were purely about like I want to gain skills that I think would be useful in my career as a software engineer, which is not what everyone is, trying to do with what classes they take. But if that were the only sort of optimization function, I think like taking classes that make you write a lot of code is the most important thing.
Mhm.
Because you just like you get the experience of like making some decisions about the design of this thing, and then you come back like 2 months later and you're like, what was I thinking? This is terrible. And that sort of experience is really hard to get in a classroom setting,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
unless the class is pretty focused on providing that experience. Because like you can learn about like computer science theory, automation theory, like all that stuff. But it's very mathematical. It's very like sort of textbook based. You don't get the sort of like the wisdom of experience, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Right.
Um, and yeah, so I think that like my advice, if you want to, feel like you're ready to I don't know, enter the workforce, it would be to find classes that encourage you to just write a lot of like code, just like a lot of it, and in big projects that are not like toy, like 1 week problem set assignments, but like something that you're doing over the course of an entire semester.
Got it. And for you personally, where do you feel like you got most of your software engineering experience?
So there were a couple classes that I took that were really helpful, the operating systems class taught by Margot Seltzer. It was a very good class. You like write a lot of basic components of an operating system, which involved writing a lot of code, and it also involved they had like built this sort of skeleton operating system
Mhm.
and like a hardware simulation layer and all this. And then they were like, okay, now you add like a file system. Okay, now you add like memory, virtual memory, right?
Mhm.
And you have a basic idea of how, at the same time that they're telling you to add this, you learn about approaches to implementing virtual memory. And so you're kind of like making a change that to an already existing system, right? Somebody already built this skeleton and you're adding
Mhm.
something to it and you need it to play well with all the existing pieces. That's very similar to what you would do in your day-to-day job as a software engineer.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think that was like really important. And then like internships for sure.
Mhm.
I was never very good. Like people always tell you to do side projects. I was never very good at doing side projects. It was like hard for me to stay motivated on them. But
Right.
I think the combination of like classes that were very sort of programming heavy, and then some internship work experience
Mhm.
was what I felt was really helpful for me.
For entering the workforce, or like for more of the practical aspects
Yeah,
of I guess computer science. And I
yeah,
guess that like kind of does lead well into the last question of this section, which is the differences between computer science and software engineering. And you touched upon a little bit of that, and that one is a little bit more math heavy, more abstract and theoretical, and the other is more like practical, like building certain systems. But yeah, if you can elaborate more on the
yeah.
differences.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of overlap, but I would
Mhm.
say that if I were to think about computer science, I would have an emphasis on like developing logical systems for reasoning about the sort of behavior of algorithms, the behavior about systems, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is abstract. A lot of that is theoretical and mathematical, and that is obviously very important and forms the basis of like why you can do any of the sort of like practical things. I would say that software engineering takes those but places them like situates them in a specific context. So it's like it is as important to say, how am I going to write this in a way that's readable for like a future person who's trying to change this code?
Mhm.
How do I make something that is easy to use for people or that people would want to use? How do I work well with other parts of the environment, be it other teams, who work in the same context, other pieces of, like code or infrastructure that I fit into, that kind of thing. So software engineering is really that discipline, which is, how do you take some of these more abstract concepts and concretize them in ways that are useful to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I see. And are there do you feel like there's a certain type of personality or a certain type of people who are more drawn to more of maybe pursuing more higher education or research within computer science
Yeah.
versus like the becoming of a software engineer or developer?
Yeah. So that's a big question, and I think that's like a question that everyone should ask themselves. If because a lot of what I talked about is like, how do you enter the workforce? But that's
Mm-hmm.
not what everyone wants to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of interesting nowadays. I work with a lot of like researchers in my current role, and it is a very different way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I would say more of it though is about like all of the things that make a good software engineer would also make a good researcher. And a lot of the things that make a good researcher also make a good software engineer. A lot of it is just about like, how can I apply the right tool for the job? Like, how do I work well with other people and share my ideas and collaborate effectively,
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things are viable for both. I would say, you really ought to think about like the most rewarding thing about research is that you get to, prove that something can be done that hasn't been done before. You get to push the state of the art forward, and you spend a lot of time, um, like exploring new areas that really you have no like guardrails because you don't know what works and doesn't because no one knows what works and doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's like really rewarding to some people, but some people don't like the idea that like 90% of your time is spent doing things that will not actually matter because it's the 10% where you are actually correct that is the sort of whole of your research impact, right? Or so and people don't like that some people don't like the feeling of feeling so lost, like you really have no guidance, you might be in completely the wrong direction, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, software engineering, some people like the idea that you could like build things and people are using them and they work well, and people like to use them and they are useful. Um, and some people find that really exhausting. Like some people would prefer to not really worry about those things and think about like what's the next thing, the next capability I can prove exists. What is the next? How can I push knowledge forward? And so it's really what you're interested in doing and like what you're interested in spending most of your time on.
Right,
That
right.
distinguishes between like a research role and a and an engineering role.
Got it. We've received a few questions from the audience, and I just I have not pointed that out in the beginning, but feel free
Oh yeah.
to
How do
on
I
the
look at them?
I can read them out loud. They're in the question section on the panel. But
Oh,
I'll just leave so feel free to ask your questions on the right hand side of the GoToWebinar. There's a little chat box with a question mark, so you could click on that and then ask your question, and I'll just save all the questions for the end of the webinar so we can
yeah. I don't
go
see
with this
any questions, but maybe if you
one.
can
Okay.
ask me them
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah. I'll ask you that at the end. So
Okay.
okay, awesome. And I guess the last question for this slide is: does graduating from a prestigious school make a difference in landing a good job in computer science or software engineering?
I mean, it doesn't hurt, I think, but from my personal observation, I think that uh, I look around at people who work with me, at very distinguished engineers that are very impactful or very senior, whatever, and they come from like a variety of different backgrounds. A lot of them, some of them come from, like MIT or like an Ivy League school, but a lot of them come from anywhere, schools that I've never heard of because they're not American schools. A lot of people come from European schools or, Chinese schools. And I don't necessarily, know that much about them, like the schools. We don't like, we're not going around like looking like, where did
What
you go to
classes
school?
did you
That's not,
take?
yeah, like nobody talks about that ever. That's not, yeah, and I have quite a few colleagues that didn't go to college, and just they decided that this is what they want to do, and they just directly started doing it, and I perceive basically no difference between them and my other teammates. And in an engineering role, I actually don't even think getting a PhD is particularly important. In a research role, it's very important, And that's like one of the sort of differences between the research and engineering side. At a and I will say that a prestigious school will definitely help if you want to pursue an academic path, just because I think at prestigious whatever school, the way they get their prestige is typically through like strong research results, and that means that there are strong researchers that you can work with in undergrad or in grad school, and they can advocate for you. They're sort of important members of the research community, so I do think that would be helpful. When it comes to like sort of a more engineering role, I don't think it makes a difference. Actually, we take a lot of interns on my team, and the strongest interns always come from the University of Waterloo,
Up
because
in Canada.
yes, because Waterloo has a strong emphasis on like practical experience in coding. So all of them are like way better interns than like any of the other, like all the Harvard students are like, what am I doing? And the Waterloo students are like, I'm done already. And so I really think it is what you make of it. And if and it doesn't really super matter if you what school you went to. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, and just to make sure that we keep on time, so the next part would be the career section. So what do you enjoy most about your career so far, and what do you dislike?
What I enjoy most, I think, is I'm given a lot of flexibility to work on the things that I think are the most important, in the context of my project, but even on what projects I work on, what teams I work on. I'm given a lot of flexibility. And similarly, that flexibility extends to like my schedule. I can, sort of show up whenever I want. I can leave whenever I want, that sort of thing. And I actually really appreciate that flexibility, because I find that a lot of the work I do, you have to like think really hard or something. And sometimes you're like tired and you don't really want to think about stuff. And I think it's great that most of these tech companies will like treat you like an adult, and they'll say, okay, you don't want to do anything, you can't really like think really hard today, you can't come up
Right.
with creative solutions to your problems. That's
Right.
fine, as long as you get what you need to get done by, in a certain time frame. Your time is your own, and you can choose to prioritize things however you want. So I really like that. I also like, working at Facebook and on PyTorch. These are both projects that, Facebook is of course like used by a lot of people,
Yes.
and PyTorch is also very sort of popular within the research community, and it's getting more popular in industry. And I like, one of the things I enjoy most about my career is like working on things, as I said in the beginning, that people like find useful and like try out and can I don't know, get value from. Um, yeah.
Right. And
What I should I talk about that?
yeah, definitely.
Oh, what do I dislike? I actually like my job a lot. I don't dislike very much. One thing I would say is like there. One thing I dislike. I before I worked on my current project, I worked on the data stores that sort of underlie Facebook's user infrastructure. So it's like if you want to ask like who's friends, is this person friends with this person? We would provide the answer to you. And that I did not like the stress of, if you make a mistake, like the Facebook site stops working and we lose a lot of money, and people are like, why isn't Facebook working? And that's like a pretty stressful position to be in. And sometimes you get like phone calls in the middle of the night because Facebook runs at all times of the day.
Right. Do you have a pager?
And oh yeah, well, we have like company phones, so it's like the
Okay.
same. They override like all your preferences. Like you can't silence it. Like it'll just like it'll go through, and they'll be like, you have to work on this right now.
At 1
And
a.m. in the
part of the
morning.
job, yeah, 1 a.m. whatever, right? And there was a story about we had like a big outage, and like Facebook wasn't working, and everyone on the team that was sort of qualified to talk about this particular system was at a river rafting offsite, and they made an agreement like not to bring their laptops, because they were like, we're not going to do any work, like we're going to bond together at like this corporate retreat.
Disconnect.
And so like everyone who could have fixed the problem was not available. So it's stuff like that, it can be really stressful. But
That's really
yeah, but that, even that is like, it's okay. it's kind of it's stressful, but it's also kind of cool in a way that it's important enough that that it's sort of it matters what you're doing, you know.
Right, and you're on call 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're on call like one week out of every month or something, or one week out of every 2 months. And then you
Okay.
can't like really go anywhere. You know, like need to bring your laptop everywhere. You're like carrying your laptop to the movies. It's weird. Yeah. So that's not ideal.
Got it. You mentioned what you're working on right now is called PyTorch.
Yes.
Okay. Can you briefly just talk about what that is?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a framework or a platform for doing deep learning or machine learning. That means basically like we provide the basic primitives that allow people to build neural networks and then optimize the neural networks according to like sort of standard techniques for doing so, like
Mhm.
gradient descent, that kind of thing. So um, if I know that y'all have a ML course, and I believe you guys use TensorFlow. So PyTorch is like a competitor to TensorFlow, basically.
Oh,
So
okay. I
if you
see.
know about TensorFlow, like PyTorch is that, but we like to think it's better. But it's
You should
definitely
pitch it
more. Oh
for
yeah, I
his
probably
class.
yeah. It is definitely more well suited to research because it's a little bit more flexible and a little bit like easier to tinker with stuff than TensorFlow is. TensorFlow is definitely has an advantage over us in terms of like industry usage and like production usage, and it powers like a lot of Google's products and that kind of thing. But PyTorch is pretty popular in the research community. So we have like a lot of academics, like professors and researchers at Facebook who use it.
I see. Got it. And then so next question is, what has been your greatest success
I don't know.
or
I
favorite
think,
projects you've worked on?
yeah, favorite project. I mean, this is a really nice project. Like I said, I like that it's one of the things I really like about it is that it's open source, which means like all the code I write, you can like go look on GitHub where it is, and we take a lot of pride in developing the project out in the open. All of our code review and all that stuff is done in GitHub instead of internally. We have like a lot of community members that we collaborate really, really closely with, and they work on like really core parts of the code base. Um, and I really think that that's like a good, I really like that about the PyTorch project
Mhm.
because I think it shows that, it's like important to have a big community and you're like giving back to the community because you're building all this stuff and it's not just for like one company to use or, one team to use. It's really for, the whole, try to advance the whole state of the research community.
Mhm. Got it. Okay, I actually will start targeting some of these questions because I don't want to go over time without answering those. So we have one question from Anthony, which is, how often do you find yourself using actual math and working through equations in your day-to-day job?
Uh, These days, some amount, like, so for example, one of the big components of PyTorch is an auto differentiation package, which basically does gradient computations on like high dimensional matrices, like as you sort of run them.
Mhm.
Um, so like, sometimes I have to come up with like symbolic derivatives for stuff. So you're like writing the derivative. I mean, it's not that complicated. A lot of machine learning stuff these days is like linear algebra. So
Okay.
you need a pretty strong grasp of like linear algebra, like matrix multiplication, that kind of thing, in order to do it well. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's about when it comes to like math, that's about it.
Mhm.
In terms of like algorithms and data structures sort of stuff, I use that a lot. We write, so the specific like part of PyTorch I work on is like a compiler. And so we have like a lot of trees, we're doing a lot of tree traversals, we're doing a lot of like optimized lookups of things. And in order to make that all fast, we use all of those like classical data structures and algorithms that you learn about.
Okay, and I'm assuming that certain classes you've taken in college would have helped you out with learning that, or did you have to learn on the job?
I don't know, like I didn't really, well, I don't think I paid that much attention to my algorithms course. So
Okay.
I think I remember. So it's like they'd be like, "Oh yeah, you use a union find here," and I was like, "I remember someone was talking about that," and then I would like go look it up and relearn it. And for me, like the way that I like learning is like I like seeing code. So like when somebody gives like a formal description of an algorithm, it's actually hard for me to convince myself that it's correct, or that it behaves in the way that it's intended to. So I like looking at implementations of things.
I
But
see.
that's like a personal thing. I think the material was covered in most of like your standard or advanced algorithms courses. But I just
Right, right, right.
I
Yeah,
didn't remember it.
right. Sometimes when there's a practical application to it, that's when the theory kind of
Yeah.
got it. Okay, wow. Lots of questions. All right. Okay, so a few that are more game oriented, actually quite a few that are specific to gaming.
Oh.
How were you able to fit in gaming with studying enough to get into Harvard?
Oh, well, I mean, like, you shouldn't play too many games. I don't know. Like, I played a lot of World of Warcraft at one point. That one was like on a schedule, so you had to like meet up with your friends at a specific time. I guess that was like, I don't have a good answer to this question. I think you should like study enough that you think you're gonna do well, and then you should like play games the rest of the time. I don't, I don't have a good.
As a way to
Uh,
de-stress so that you're re-energized. Go back to
Yeah, it's like important to relax. Like one of the things that I realized, especially with work, is like I used to really beat myself up when I had like a week where I was like, I don't really like I am not being very productive. Like I'm not really thinking very much. Like it's hard for me to focus, hard for me to concentrate. And after a while, I realized like those you'll have a couple off days, and it's okay to like goof off and just like do random stuff and like
Mhm.
play games. Like at work, sometimes you'll see people like watching Netflix. I don't know, like people just do whatever. And that's just because it's like that's how like the brain works. You can't just be like working really hard and studying and like forcing yourself to work and like focus all of the time.
Right.
Like I don't understand. I'm not very envious of people who work like really really strict like 9 to 5 jobs and like have to like appear to be productive at all times, because I don't think that people actually work that way. I think like
Right.
you can be creative maybe like 3 or 4 hours out of every day, and then you can do stuff that's job related that's not like really really intense focus,
Hmm.
for the other
Hmm.
part. And then
Hmm.
like but sometimes you're just not feeling it, and part of it is being responsible enough to like know that like I'm still gonna get what I need to get done,
Hmm.
and not give yourself such a hard time when you're like not being productive like at every moment. Um,
Right.
and I think actually it increases your like total throughput if you do it, because the times where you are productive, you're really productive,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you're like really refreshed and you're ready to think and you're ready to make a lot of progress.
Right. Yep. And I agree. Yep. And so then this is more of a more extreme, I guess, question about gaming, which is what suggestion would you like to give to parents who are troubled by their children addicted to games?
Well, addiction is like a strong word. I mean, I
Right.
think games can be very, very sort of like compelling, and a lot of it is like
It's
they're
designed to
designed
be
to
that way.
kind of suck you in. And what was it like? What advice to parents?
What suggestions would you like to give to parents? Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean,
Or if
I'm
you
not a
could go
parent,
back and
so it's
tell your
hard.
parents, like back, like,
I think maybe it's like I think that probably a bad way to go about it is to like try and ban games or whatever. I think like I remember like I argued a lot with my parents about like they were like you can't play games, and I was like but I like doing it. And I don't know that like trying to be prohibitionist about it is the right approach. I think that um like trying to encourage games like I said that like emphasize creativity, games that are like social in nature where you play with people and like with friends,
yeah.
I think that can be like pretty healthy. And I think it's like instead of adopting like a like this is bad, we need to reduce it, we it would be nice if people took an approach which is like how do we find the good parts and like the parts that help you like grow as a person when you like play games or whatever, and like help spark interest in other things like computer science, like whatever else. um, but at the same time, so I think that like taking a more sort of positive approach might be helpful. But at the same time, these games are, very, very, addictive is a
Mhm.
strong word, but they're like designed to keep you playing, right? And sometimes you just like should stop playing. I don't know. Uh, I think the
Right.
thing is like, don't. I don't think people should think about it as like you're playing games, you should stop. It should be like, what's the right balance? Like, are you getting the things that you need to get done? Like, are you doing well in school? Do you have like friends that you like go hang out with, or are you like constantly on your computer not doing anything else? Like, that's not good. But
Mhm.
I think it's all about the right balance to strike. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And that kind of segues to the next one, which is spent on play how much time spent on playing on Minecraft per day is too much. I guess it depends
I
on
mean,
the
I don't know.
person.
I mean, like, even now, I am upset to say my wife would not like me to say that I spend like maybe 1 to 3 hours almost every day playing games.
Hmm.
Um,
That
and
sounds
that's a lot of
reasonable.
time. Yeah, but like, I play with my friends and and my coworkers as well, actually. And so that's how much time has worked for me. If I start going over, you just like get tired and it kind of feels gross. So I don't play that much more. But I don't know. I think it's all about like, there's no hard rule, right? It's just, can you do you feel like you're happy about the rest of your life? Like
Hmm.
if I felt like I was playing too many games, and like my career wasn't going well or something, I'd probably try and play less, or I'd like try and get
Hmm.
someone to get me to play less. But if if things are going well, and you are happy with how things are going and the future, then you know, do
Right,
whatever.
right, right. Like you said, like have a good balance. Yep.
Mm.
And then so this one is more so. So there are a few questions more about your extracurriculars. I believe when you were in high school. So the first, what kind of things did you do over the summer in high school slash college to further your interests?
So in high school, I went to debate camp in the summer. So I was on the debate team. I was really invested in debate. I really liked it. It was a lot of fun, and I liked
Hmm.
the team. And we would go to these camps like 7 weeks in the summer and like learn how to debate better, basically. So that's what
Hmm.
I did in the summer,
Okay.
and that was also my main extracurricular. I don't think I really did very much else in terms of extracurricular. Like I was on the math team, uh, and that's about it. I spent most of my time on debate and getting sort of good at that.
Oh, amazing. It's like one of the attendees, Anthony, like as if he's predicted it, because his question is how have extracurricular activities like debate fit into your experience in CS, both academically and in your current job?
So debate specifically, I think actually there are a lot of sort of transferable skills. One is I got a lot better at public speaking,
Hmm.
and just talking and phrasing your arguments through debate. That was, I think, really helpful actually, and I think it helps me. It helped me at school. It helps me in my job. Like it's easier to, I don't know, communicate my ideas than it otherwise probably would have been.
Hmm.
Um, uh, yeah, I mean that's the main thing. Oh, the other thing is I think debate also teaches you to sort of like critically think about things and like analyze ideas. And a lot of the sort of procedure you use to analyze ideas can be you can analyze an idea that is like a here is our idea for how to implement this new feature, right? Or it could be this is what the government should do. I think that sort of critical thinking is actually pretty portable across different domains.
Hmm.
So I think that was actually very helpful as well.
Got it. And then also, do you feel that learning another subject, fields such as medicine, financial, world economics, would be giving you the opportunity to apply your computer skills to solve business slash research problems?
Um, I think so,
So, yeah.
yes.
Hmm.
Um, so one of the things that I think is interesting about this is like with healthcare, for example, a lot of the problems to do with healthcare um, are not ones that are solved by sort of like applied computer science expertise, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the problems with the current healthcare system are political in nature, they're economic in nature, they're like human in nature, right? Um, and a lot of those like software won't really help make those better. I mean, well, they can help, but they're not the limiting factor, I think, on the total performance of the system. um, I think, uh, but at the same time, I think that there's a lot of good that software or computer science can do for those domains. Like, for example, PyTorch is used to make MRIs and medical imaging a lot faster and more accurate. And that's just like, I think that that's a pretty good opportunity. I would say that if you want to be a computer science, if you want to approach it from a computer science perspective, it's more important to build domain expertise in computer science than it is to build domain expertise in healthcare. Because there will always be a doctor who can like tell you,
The
this
problems.
is what's the problem. And as long as you can communicate well with them and collaborate well with them, I think it'll be an effective collaboration. Um, the times where I've seen this gone wrong is like, software people build like a bunch of tools, and it turns out that's not actually what anyone wanted or needed.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that is like a core software engineering skill, which is just like, how do I produce something that like people actually want, not
Mm-hmm.
like what I thought they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So to me, I think it's like, yeah, it's important to work on your sort of core skills before branching out into a different domain. Um, because there will always be people who are like experts in healthcare or finance, but what they lack is what you would want to bring to the table, right? Which is expertise in computer science and software engineering.
Right. Sometimes dabbling in too many areas can stretch yourself a little bit too thin. So focus on the core. And we have a question from Segway Lee. Where did you attend the debate camp?
Huh. I went to my sophomore year. I went to Dartmouth. My junior year, I went to Michigan, the 7-week camp, and then my senior year, I went to Georgetown for 3 weeks and Dartmouth for 4 weeks.
Okay, amazing. And then Kaden Shin asks, what motivated you in high school to focus on studying and do really well?
Um, I think that like I don't know, like I think my parents really always sort of taught me that it was like valuable to like learn stuff. So a lot of it was just like I like learning stuff. And
Mhm.
on occasion it would not really overlap very well with school because school is only like 50% about learning stuff and the other 50% is about like random stuff that I don't really understand. Um, but
Mhm.
like I focused on like, oh, it's actually cool to learn about chemistry or whatever. And there's a lot of like process, there are these tests, there's this homework, and I didn't really like most of that, but I did like learning about chemistry. So I just focused on that part, and I thought that that was, um, a good way to like get excited at least about doing some of it.
Yeah. And okay, another game-oriented one. Jingyan Zhao asks, during middle and high school, did you ever play games during class?
Yeah. Yeah, so there are like a couple different ways that you can do this. I like you have the graphing calculator was the classic, right? Like the Phoenix game. And I got at one point my brother gave me his like TI-89, which is like a better
Uh-huh.
graphing calculator, and then you could install like a little RPG on there, and you could like play one of those, and it was like pretty complex, and it's like a procedurally generated dungeon. It was pretty cool. It was all in BASIC, by the way, so like you could like program your own, and then like I learned that you could jailbreak iPod touches and put a
Oh.
Game Boy Advance emulator on them. So like I had like Pokemon on my like iPod touch and I was just like playing. But that
That's
was like, yeah, that's hard to like play in class because you have to actually focus a lot. So like I played like during study hall or whatever, like you get your homework done and you'd be bored and you'd be like they don't let you run around, so you just like sit there and you could like play games or
got it.
whatever.
And another game one from Yongzhang, which is how do you think gaming impacted your career?
Like I said, I think it fostered a lot of interest and passion for computer science, and I think that's true for a lot of people. Um,
Do you think it
um,
inspired? Do you think it inspired you to like build your own computer, and also the fact
yeah,
that you had
definitely,
gone
and
through
I
so
think
much
that yeah, I think I appreciate that my parents like really like they focused on what could be valuable from playing games. Not like this is like terrible. And so they like made me do some work basically to like convince them that I should play games. But that work ended up being like kind of impactful for how I thought about the industry and how I thought about what I would be interested in doing and like cultivating my own sort of interests in things. So yeah, I think it was always good. And like I've always played games like a little bit. I used to play more. Now I play a lot less. But it's
One to
definitely
three
like a
hours
part
a
of the
day.
overall culture. Yeah, a lot less. Yeah.
Got it. Yep. And we have okay, so you've mentioned basic. How about so this is a question from Ethan Song. Except for Java, what is your most recommended programming language to study?
Um, okay, I'm gonna give the caveat that like a lot of people probably give, which is that the language itself is not as relevant as the underlying sort of concepts or fundamentals. If you understand programming languages, like as a general category of things, like every programming language, like they're not that different. They're all kind of the same. They have different ways of doing what essentially are the same sets of things. And there are like paradigms for programming languages. You have your like sort of more imperative languages, you have functional languages, you have object-oriented languages, you have sort of like hybrid languages that and so I think that it's more important to study up on the sort of like fundamentals, which requires that you just like learn a bunch of languages and you figure out like, oh, these are all the same thing, phrased in different ways or sort of like optimized for different things. To give like a more concrete answer, I guess, it depends on what you want to do. So, for example, if you want to work on like web development, you got to learn JavaScript. I mean, that is this sort of language that like the internet is written in, primarily because it's the only one with like supported cross-platform implementations on every browser, right? If you want to do like systems and like database and stuff like that, you have to learn C++ because that is the language that is used for building systems that are latency sensitive, performance sensitive, throughput sensitive, need to be, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Uh, for sort of general application development, I think like something like Python would be good because or machine learning and data science, Python is like what everyone uses there. So it's more about like the community of people you want to be in than anything else. Like I think you should start with figuring out like what type of thing you want to work on, and then every one of those will have like a favored language,
Mhm.
and then learn that language.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I would just like to point out that we do teach in Java. That's our programming language that we teach in because the APCS is done in Java. And also with Python, I do know there's a lot of built-in libraries, but with Java, a lot a lot of it is like you don't have these crutches that you can rely on with the built-in libraries.
Yeah, I mean, Java is great. I like a lot of Google stuff is built in Java. Java is very good for the sort of like server-side applications development, which is like a lot of what these big internet companies do. Yeah,
Yep.
so I think that Java is like a good choice because it's a very general purpose programming language. It can do a lot of things pretty well. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Okay, from Christina Lee. Wow, we have a lot of questions. From Christina Lee, we're just going to neglect all of the questions that I've prepared. Okay, her question is, what was your thought process when deciding between pursuing economics versus CS at Harvard?
um, Well, I just liked doing computer science more. Like I literally just liked, like while I was doing like work related to computer science, I was just more interested and engaged than I was when I was trying to do like my economics problem set. And ultimately, I think that's like how you have to make your decision about what you want to study and like focus on for at least like the next probably 10 years of your life is like, what do you actually like doing? And I think a lot of people, this is like kind of a classic like Harvard-y problem, which is like a lot of people are really focused on doing well, and they're not as focused on like what they want or like what they're interested in. And so they do really well, and then like 5 years out of college, they have like a sort of crisis because they're like, I don't actually like my life, and I need to make a change, right? And this is actually really common, and I think that a lot of it has to do with you have to step out and ask yourself, like, do I actually like doing this thing? And if you don't, like, can you find something that you actually like doing? And ideally, it's like also something that's practical to make a career out of, because not everything that you like doing is practical. But for most people, there's at least one thing that you like doing that you could also, pursue as a sort of as work, as a career.
Right, exactly. And from James Fan, how long did it take you to find your perfect job as a Harvard alumni?
My perfect job. Ooh, well, I actually graduated without a job. This is very rare. I think most people at school like got their jobs like after the end of junior year. They already knew when they were going to work. Like they had it all mapped out. And I was kind of just like derping along, and so I graduated that job, and then I went to go live in New York for a while, for like 6 months maybe, and I was just like interviewing and kind of just like living. I took a research research assistant position to make some money, and I just focused on yeah, I interviewed for a bunch of companies, and I focused on ones that I thought like fit with how I thought about like things, thought about the world, thought about what was good, and like how you should structure a workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And of those, I think that like Facebook was the closest to what I wanted, because they have an emphasis on building things that are very large scale and like very ambitious, but at the same time, they want to offer their engineers a lot of flexibility, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
flexibility and a lot of autonomy to make like technical decisions and even like product or business decisions. And I liked that, and I focused on finding a good fit in that respect,
Mm-hmm.
with the companies that I interviewed for.
Got it. And he has a follow-up question, which is your current job your dream job?
Well, it's the same job, so I really like it. I mean, one of the nice things about being like a computer science person, I guess, is that like you get job offers all the time, and I don't ever look at them. I don't want to change my job, so I guess and I really enjoy it, and I like going to work, and I like the project I work on and the people I work with. So, cool.
Mm-hmm. I was about to ask James, is he looking to hire you for something? But anyways, so Kaden Shin has a question. Has your parents ever told you to study or do your homework?
Oh yeah, I mean, like all the time, like they would always be like, "You should study," like. uh, I mean, one of the
Awesome.
things is like when you're a kid. Here's the thing: it's like when you're a kid, sometimes your parents like have to tell you to do things because you're a kid and you're dumb and you like don't know that you need to do this thing. If that makes sense, like sometimes parents really do know best. And so yeah, I don't know. My parents would tell me to study all the time. I would
Yep.
study some of the time when they told me to study. Yeah.
Okay. And from Anthony, was there anything about your undergraduate CS experience that you wish you had done differently?
um, Yeah, I wish I had taken fewer interdisciplinary classes and more classes. Once again, I'm repeating myself, I guess, but like classes
Mhm.
that involve like lots of coding.
Yeah.
Uh, because this is partially because of what I said earlier, which is I think it gives you like the right skills, but it's partially also like how I like to learn things. Like I like to learn by like building something small and like messing around with it and kind of seeing how it works.
Hmm.
Uh, and a lot of the interdisciplinary classes, like I took an economics and computation class, which was very interesting. But I think I didn't leave with like a deeper understanding than I would have if I like read a series of like blog posts on the subject. Like I guess I worked out the formulas, but like you forget the formulas that you worked out if you don't use them, right? So it's like I left with like an appreciation that this is like a cool thing, but not much more than that, right?
Hmm.
Whereas the classes that I took that involved like laboring over whatever like my project, and it was like terrible, and I broke everything and I had to like fix it right before the deadline. Like those are the ones that you really like teach you lessons that you remember.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I wish I
Right.
had taken a few more of those. And I also started like kind of late, because I only switched my concentration in my like junior-ish year.
Yeah.
So I like took a bunch of classes really close together, and that was not great. But I mean,
That sounds really
can't really
stressful.
change that.
Yeah. And what could someone do? Okay, so this is again gaming. What could someone do if gaming affected their grades in school?
What can
from
someone do?
yeah
I
from
mean, then
Jin
you gotta
Young?
play less games. I don't know what to say. Like, uh, I like if you
I
think, yeah, I don't know. Like, if you think that grades are really important, like you might not think that, I suppose, but I think most people think that. Like, you have to find a good balance, and that, I think a lot of it is like, I think that if parents are too sort of prohibitionist and like aggressive about like you can't play any games, it like becomes like a point of stress or like a point of tension in all of it, and you get all sorts of like negative feelings associated with even that conversation. So like helping people productively come to more of a balance, I think is like a more productive way to get someone to make a better trade-off in terms of like games versus grades or whatever, right?
right, right,
Then like I don't know. Like my parents would sometimes yell at me, and I'd be like, "Why are you yelling at me? Like this is making me like I don't
right,
think it
right.
actually delivers the result that you want, which is that I change like how much I do certain things. I don't know, but
I
it is difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've definitely touched upon the subject enough. There are more questions about like avoiding addiction to games and whatnot, but let's
Yeah.
this is an interesting question
Okay.
from Fabian. It's from a parent. When did you go to bed usually when you were in high school and college?
Oh man. In college, okay. Well, in high school, I went to bed like um, when I was younger, my parents would make me go to bed at like a reasonable time. And then I think they like gave up at some point, and then I just went to bed at like random times. One of the things is like you have to wake up at a certain time, so if you don't get any sleep, it's just terrible.
Yeah.
So I would go to bed at like midnight, 1, 2, I think. Uh, in
Mm.
college, I would go to bed. It would be very, very dependent on like my workload or whatever. One of the things about computer science is like everybody stays up all night. I don't know why people do this. It's like not good for you. But it's like one of the things that people do. It's like you have a project and everyone kind of like gets together and like works into the night.
Mhm.
And people, yeah. So sometimes you would stay up until like 6 a.m. trying to do something to make a deadline, and then you would sleep a bunch, like 10 hours, and then it wasn't a very healthy lifestyle for sure.
Yeah, that's
Um,
like across the board most college students. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think a lot of college students are like that. And then now that I'm at work, it's kind of funny because like I'm also getting older, so this is another thing. It's like if I don't sleep enough, I literally just can't think. Like I cannot focus if I don't sleep. So I try to go to sleep really early now and wake up really early. I'm like becoming my parents basically. But it just turns out like that's the most effective thing. But when I was a kid, you can get like 4 hours of sleep and you're fine. I don't
Right,
know. It's
right.
it's very different. So now I sleep. I try to get a good like 8 or 9 hours of sleep every night.
Awesome. Okay, so because it is 8 o'clock, I do want to. I'm sorry about this, Michael, but there's one more question, and then that would be the last
It's
question
okay.
that I'm
It's
going to.
only 5 here, so I'm fine.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
got
I
it.
can stay on for a while longer if you like.
Okay, sure. So if people in the audience, if you have any last minute questions that you would like to ask Michael, you could feel free to ask it right now because he has nicely decided to or agreed to extend this. But so this one is more of what your goals are for the future. So Lanjan asks, what is the long-term professional goal for the future for you?
Well, for me, this is kind of an interesting question. I think that like there are two ways that you can think about it. You can think about it in terms of your impact, or you can think about it in terms of your like job title, right? I don't really like want to think about it too much in terms of my job title, but I do want I want at the end of my career to feel like I made like a very substantial contribution to like I don't know the state of the art for something for like research or for production, whatever the thing may be. Like I feel like I really helped build something really great that really pushed things forward that no one really did before. Um, in terms of like professional goals, like the way that people in industry like typically think about it is like you can become like a very sort of senior engineer, and you influence primarily in sort of technical scope and impact and direction. And but you are an individual contributor, so you are also writing code. You're also doing like design work and that kind of thing. And some
Mhm.
people want to go into management, which is like a parallel thing. So you can also become a very senior manager, and then it's more about building teams. Like, can you build organizations that are healthy, that communicate well with other organizations, that that can execute effectively, and like set goals for themselves and that kind of thing. And you're very focused on growing the organization. I actually don't know, like, ultimately what I'd be more like, whether I'd be more interested in one or the other. I mean, yeah, it's for now, I want to focus on building my sort of technical skills, because I think those will come in handy regardless of how I want to sort of make my influence.
Yeah, fantastic. And Kaden Shin asks, what do you wish your parents did differently when they were raising you? Oh, interesting. Lots of questions from parents.
What do I wish my parents had done differently? I think they did a good job. I think part of it is like this is the thing. It's like we would fight about, like I would be doing things to do. I wonder if like there could have been like a better way than like they like scold me and I'm like, but I want to do whatever I do, like I wonder if there's a more sort of like positive way to get kids to do what you need them to do, if that makes sense. But I actually I really think that my parents, for example, did not put a lot of pressure on me to do really well in school. Instead, they gave me like values where I felt that I wanted to do well in school, or I wanted to learn about like this or that. And I think it was more of like a showing, not telling thing. So like my father is a professor, so like the things that get him excited are talking about like science and talking about like explaining to me like thermodynamics, or how like air pressure works, or how like why the sky is blue, that kind of thing. And like the thing he would always be most excited about is like reading a book, and like so he would just do that all the time. And I think I learned a lot from that. And same with my mother as well. I think I learned a lot from watching them and what they valued and what they did, and what made them happy. And I kind of like took on the same things. And I thought that was like a more effective way than like, and they like shared that with me. They told me what made them happy and like how they thought about things and what they thought was important. And I thought that was like more motivating than like if they had like scolded me a lot, which they did. They still scolded me a lot, but it was like,
A fine balance between the two. Yeah, it's not like consistently scolding you. Yeah, right. And okay, next question from Mimi Zhang. In your opinion, are middle school grades indicators of high school grades? What is the most important thing to keep good grades in high school?
I mean, not really. Like middle school doesn't really matter that much in terms of grades. It is, I guess, like one of those like past performance is kind of a predictor of future performance, in the specific sense that like getting good grades in middle school, like all you have to do is like do the homework. Like I don't think it's like that deep. It's like if you're kind of doing the homework and like trying pretty hard, like you'll get good grades. And I think in high school it like becomes a little more difficult. But like those basic habits that you build are kind of important. So yeah, I don't know. If the question is like how to get good grades in high school, it's like like do all the assignments and like try to learn. But I don't know. Like as a parent, I'm not sure. Like I said, I think it's like I'm not sure how effective long term the like you have to do your homework right now kind of thing is, as opposed to like
These
kind
are
of
very different
sharing.
subjects.
Yeah, kind of sharing like a enthusiasm for like learning itself. But I don't know, it's
Awesome. This is an interesting question from a student, I believe. So Steve asks, I'm going to kind of rephrase it, but did you ever have to deal with stereotypes in high school or college, and how would you deal with them?
I mean, there are all sorts of stereotypes that people like place on each other. There are like sort of like racial stereotypes, of course. I went to a high school that had a lot of Chinese people, and a lot of Asian American kids in general. So I didn't like feel that beset upon by that sort of thing, because you can find your own community And you can, people who have similar experiences and backgrounds to you. And that was like, I really like that about my high school. But at the same time, you get exposure to other people with other different and diverse kinds of experience and background. And that's also really important. And there are also stereotypes around like computer science, right? Like as a sort of like Asian American male, you like kind of people assume that you kind of know what you're talking about sometimes, which for a long time, like I actually thought that was weird because I felt that I didn't know what I was talking about. And then I was like, oh God, like everyone, like is expecting me to do X, Y, Z, but I have no idea how to do it. Right. And so that's like, can be troublesome, but of course it's also like beneficial in some ways.
Right.
And I think a big part of it is just like, you have to develop your own way of thinking about yourself and your own identity, and not worry too much about how other people, like what other people are thinking about you, or like how they think about you, or in what context they place you in, right? And a lot of that has to do with like figure out what you care about and figure out like how to do like good things for what you care about, like how to do well at it. And then it's a lot easier to not care about the other stuff because you're like, that stuff's stupid, it doesn't matter anyway. you know
Yeah.
if you know what you think is important, then just focus on that. And like the other stuff doesn't really matter. Like if somebody told me like, you're not very good at like playing pool, I'd be like, yeah, I don't care, like that's not important to me. Like, is there some stereotype about people like who can't play pool? Like I just don't care, right?
Right.
And so I think it's more about finding in yourself like what you think is important, who you want to be, that kind of thing. Then and that
Yeah.
helps navigate those things.
I think that's very helpful, especially for a lot of the students to listen to in this conference. And then questions about, okay, so Kaden asks, what kind of people do Facebook hire? How do they decide?
Well, Facebook hires all sorts of people. We don't have any, as far as I know, like requirements. Like you don't have to have gone to college. I didn't. They don't like. I didn't put my GPA on my resume when I sent it to Facebook. Like they don't care about any of that. Actually, Facebook's like a little unique because I remember Google like asks for your SAT score or something, which I think is kind of funny. Maybe that's not good to say. But in general, I think they're looking for people who like can sort of think and express their ideas clearly, and they typically test for that by using the language that you're expected to know, which is the sort of language of computer science, which is why they ask you all these sort of algorithms questions. It's not like, do you actually like, can you memorize how to like write reversing a linked list or whatever on a blackboard? That's not the point of it. It's like, can you work through this problem and like talk to someone about working through it and talk about like the trade-offs and, oh, I would do it this way or that way, and keep all of the sort of various pieces of the problem in your head. Can you do that effectively? And that's what they're really looking for, and who they're excited to hire, I think.
Okay. And also, okay, so two more questions. And this is actually a good one to just wrap up the webinar with, which is from Christina. If there's one thing you'd want us to walk away with this talk, what would it be?
Uh,
A message to bestow upon all of the students and parents in this conference.
oh my goodness. Okay. I think, okay, my thing will be like, spend at least as much time trying to figure out like what you like doing, like what gets you excited, um, and like what you think is important, as spend at least as much energy and time like thinking about those questions as you do thinking about like, how do I do well? Because it doesn't matter how well you do if it doesn't matter how far you go in one direction if the direction is the wrong direction, right? So you really need to find out like what you like doing, and focus on that. And I think that if you do that, you can take a lot of shortcuts. There are a lot of things that other people do because they're just kind of like following the path that you don't have to do if you found out that you cared about something else. And so figuring that out for yourself is, no one else can tell you that because it's what you care about ultimately. People can tell you how to like get good grades or how to like do well in college, whatever, but people can't really tell you like how to figure out what you like doing or like what you care about. So
Mhm.
focus at least as much on that as anything else.
I love that. Yeah. And then the last one, which is what's a good place to begin learning programming? And that's a good way to circle back to
KTBYTE,
Katie.
Computer Science
Yay!
Academy. Yeah, yeah, it's a great place to learn
Awesome.
programming.
Yeah, so it is 8:14 over here, so we've gone a little bit over time, but I do want to say, so we've skipped past the rest of the questions I've come up with, which is totally fine. But if you have any questions for me or for Michael, if that's okay for us to forward over some questions for you, maybe,
Yeah,
definitely email us at inquiry@ktbyte.com. Also, go to our website, www.ktbyte.com, and check out our website and learn more about some of the courses that we offer. Yeah, and I want to wrap up and say, Michael, thank you so much for giving this
yeah.
talk. Lots of very interesting questions, actually. I can see that there is a theme to this, but I love the takeaway, which is like to come find your own values of what you feel like is important to you, and then go that direction instead of being fixated on some of the smaller the trees within the forest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, awesome. So thank you everyone so much for joining the webinar, and thank you, Michael, for answering all of these questions.
Yeah. All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
awesome. Yeah, have a good evening. Or yeah, over there.
It,
Bye.
it's evening, basically. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Bye.
All right, bye. Thank you.